It's time for another Q&A video. If you got any questions, post yours down below and the most liked comments will be answered next time. So don't be shy, I'm here to help you out. Let's get started. Why are my arms getting stronger but measuring smaller? Example, I could curl 60 pounds with 16.5-inch arms. Now I curl 80 pounds with just 15.5-inch arms. Is it just a loss of body fat? We're talking about a 1-inch difference and you lost fat. Assuming this is a barbell curl, it's reasonable to assume that you successfully recomped. So how do you lose a whole inch if your biceps got stronger? Simply put, you store more fat in the triceps, which constitute 2/3 of the upper arms. In fact, what you lost occurs with most lifters, myself included. When I transition from bear mode to ascetic, the minimum is 1 inch less, and the fat primarily comes from the meaty sweep of the long head, the lowest part where you're measuring from. Plus, it's easier to maintain curling strength in a cut than pressing strength, given the leverages, which further adds on to my point. Could it be that your triceps got a lot weaker or became more defined? As proof, understand that a mere 20-pound increase on a barbell curl was never responsible for a +1 inch, let alone a -1 inch. The only scenario where that would be justifiable is if you were doing one-arm dumbbell curls or dumbbell extensions for the triceps. Now let's say I misinterpreted your question and you indeed dumbbell curl 80 pounds. I have to ask, how are your arms only 15.5 inches? That in itself is a red flag, meaning you'd be using terrible cheek curling form. Like, do you know how rare it is for naturals to curl that much weight? That you did this in a deficit with sub-16s? I highly doubt this is your problem, but for those who are ego lifters, please stop doing underhand power cleans. Progressive cheating is not progressive overload. And let's be honest, the only reason why you're doing sloppy curls is because you can go significantly heavier. It's not because Arnold did them and cheat curls work through the eccentric overload. That is a lie that you use to justify your bad habits. Get humbled, do it correct. A bit of body English is perfectly fine. I include a bit of torso sway myself. But at the end of the day, big biceps aren't even the answer to begin with. It's triceps that will take that measurement to the next level. For example, did you know that the Hodge twins had horrible biceps tendonitis and couldn't train curls with much intensity?
We suffer from bicep tendonitis, so we can't really go heavy on curling movements.
So we do a lot of reps, man.
Yeah, it's only 20 pounds, but man, that shit hurts like hell, man.
Oh yeah, we burned them out, man.
Yet at the peak of their YouTube career, they had over 18-inch arms because their triceps were brutally strong. Close grip benching well over 3 plates for reps, off every angle. And their pushdown strength, extension strength, dips, all the presses and work for the tries was as high as you're gonna get. Just something to consider. A big arm is not necessarily an aesthetic flexed arm. And it's possible that your arm looks better now, even though it is a little bit smaller. At least you can see the shape of your biceps. Is it okay to feel the long head of the triceps when doing V-bar pushdowns? Since the arms are internally rotated, by design, a V-bar pushdown is for the lateral and medial head. The arms are tucked in front of the body, making shoulder extension, aka squeezing that long head, not doable. So how are you feeling it? Simply put, by raising the elbows up towards the face, turning the pushdown into a pullover hybrid via shoulder flexion. Now, is this acceptable form? Only if you aren't using the raising of elbows as a technique to reduce the negative. See, many lifters will unbend the arms by a quarter, then immediately raise the elbows, after which they use that momentum to drive back down, allowing for very heavy weights to be used. I don't like that. Instead, slowly smash the form into your biceps, and only then, if you do want some long head stretch, can you raise higher. Just don't turn it into this jerky pullover hybrid. That extra momentum is potentially dangerous on restrictive triceps isolation exercises, where there's already more lateral forces on the elbow. So if anything, fast cheating is more appropriate with ropes, even if you're barely spreading them apart, simply due to the alignment factor with explosiveness. And the same logic applies to skull crushers, and a close easy bar is not too different from a V-bar pushdown, right? Remember, the same function is performed, elbow extension. Just because pushdowns are generally short and biased doesn't mean you can't get hurt. Lastly, if you do want more long head from pushdowns but from the stretch, why not just use the incline version for a lengthened bias resistance profile? It's also going to be stricter by default since you're tilting back like an extension, not straight up and in front, which more so mimics a cable pullover. How often should I max out on weighted pull-ups if I'm chasing a high 1-rep max? And should I rotate to a different variation the next workout and do the same? Also, how would bulking or cutting affect this? Either you max out at the start of the mesocycle to establish your percentages, which could vary greatly anywhere between 4 to 12 weeks, or you can follow a conjugate thought process, which is how I personally got super strong on pull-ups. In this situation, I would recommend maxing out once a week. Doing it twice a week is rough. And I actually did this recently in my Road to Shredded series, so be sure to check it out for some max effort ideas. So instead, one top set of lower reps followed by one top set of moderate reps is a viable replacement. Or using the dynamic effort method for explosiveness, which is quite specific to calisthenics. So scrapping max effort work for more conventional sets and reps is probably a smarter idea for net recovery. Plus, you would need more equipment to make double max effort work, since you are effectively going through 8 pull-ups in 1 month. Which begs the question, should the pull-up variation be rotated every workout, even if you're maxing out once a week? Well, if it's between 90 and 100%, a true 1-rep max, and you're grinding every week, then yes, you must rotate. Don't try to be the exception. Louis Simmons figured this out decades ago, and so have I experimented with weekly max effort. You want small PRs accumulated over time, learning how to strain, having a pool of favorites that you go back to. Trust me, you won't even last 3 weeks if you try to keep doing the same pull-up. You'll either suffer from overuse, specifically golfer's elbow, stay the same, or go backwards. This is what gives maxing out a bad rep. Idiots testing the same way every time they step in the gym. So the opener must be different, but the percentage backdowns can keep the same variation as last week, since it is normal hypertrophy work using double progression, and there's room for plus ones. Here, I recommend swapping it out every 3 weeks, but some like 4 to 6 weeks, or even longer. I just want to make sure that you're also getting this work with the recent 1-rep maxes. So if anything, relocate to your B-day after the percentage is established. This way, there's more variety and everything is staying specific to the heavy tested lifts. By the way, this advice also applies to dips and every exercise that you plan on maxing out on, with maybe the exception of deadlifts, since the taxing effect differs. Regarding body weight, always examine the total number to calculate PRs. So you can even bring a scale in your gym bag or weigh yourself before training. This will keep you in check because if the total number is decreasing while you're getting lighter, that means you're getting weaker. Likewise, if the total goes up while bulking but the external load is not going up, well, you're getting stronger. Tracking is simple in this way. So don't go crazy with relative strength multipliers. Can the dumbbell flat press be replaced with dips? I still want to include some form of calisthenics in my weightlifting program. Yes, in fact, dips arguably stretch your pecs more than dumbbell bench press. Since the weight is suspended from the hips, it does not matter how many plates are sandwiched together. From day 1 until elite status, the same range of motion or more, since you have greater tissue capacity, is maintained. Unlike dumbbells, where their physical size becomes a restriction that eventually compromises range of motion, requiring specific technique adjustments like barrel presses or flaring way out so the tip of the plates hit the armpits, which might not even be doable past 100 pounds. Whereas with dips, body weight versus weighted has no restriction. Not from the center, like a barbell bench would restrict you, nor the sides, like dumbbells would. And because the torso can also shift, as in you have control by tilting forward, that allows for an even greater stretch on the pecs. With the exception of deficit push-ups and camber bar bench, I can think of no other compound that allows for this true end range to be hit. And yes, it is many inches deeper than a dumbbell bench press. Regarding stability, dips are not more unstable than dumbbells, even though you're also coordinating your body through space. The proof is that the total load lifted can often match your barbell bench press or even exceed it. So many 200-pound men can perform 200-pound weighted dips for reps, and their bench press might be in the 405 to 455 range. Yet, Their dumbbell press may at most be 70% of that exact load. And dips are a competition movement that can be maxed out and standardized. Clearly, stability is not hurting motor unit recruitment, aka maximum force output, if people are setting world records, maxing out on the weekly, having no issues with progressive overload. Yet when guys are dumbbell pressing the 120s and beyond, look at all the problems that come up. Stability is the main reason. So the only exception would be the ring dip, which leads me on to one final distinction: the humeral adduction component. Bringing the upper arm across the body is the primary function of the pecs. So if the argument is that dumbbells allow for superior convergence than bar dips, that would be correct, but not by a big deal, since we're still operating via free weight gravity. You get slightly more pec activation in the mid to top range, but it's only by a couple degrees of joint angles in the least hypertrophic aspect of this lift. The true value of dumbbells pertaining to upper arm movement is being able to go lower than a barbell, assuming you're not half repping, and doing so with heavy weights, being able to overload more than dumbbell flies, still being a press. So it still goes back to the bottom. And with that said, since we established that dips on average allow for greater stretch, then the converging argument isn't really a strong one. But if we are to compare ring dips to dumbbells, technically they lose again, because here the straps can be positioned outwards, diagonal, such that the end range does allow for meaningful humeral adduction under load. The rings can be brought together. Heavy dumbbells can't do that while squeezing hard. So if there is a benefit to shorten work, again, you're covered. So not only do you not need dumbbell presses, but you can also skip out the cable work and pec deck if you're doing bar dips and ring dips. Lastly, I want to let you know that from late 2019 until 2021, I trained exclusively with bench presses, standing overhead presses, and dips. Zero dumbbells, didn't have access, and you know why. And guess what? It was the most successful strength journey of my YouTube career. I benched 405 at 185, and I know for a fact that dips were helpful in building my deep bottom strength. So pecs were never a limiting factor. I still live on them. They really are the upper body squat, and there's a reason why so many street lifters automatically have strong bench presses and watermelon pecs, oftentimes by only dipping heavy. Like I said before, the total weight is often correlated with your bench press 1 rep max. Brute force with weighted stretching progressive overload for the win. What do you think of T-bar rows for horizontal pulls? In terms of free weighted rows, the T-bar row stands out among the rest, given the unique circular strength curve of the landmine. From the golden era until now, many bodybuilders build legendary backs with this exact row, often preferring it over the traditional bent over barbell row, even though the movements are quite similar on the surface and do feed into each other. So what was different? The plates hitting the torso angle itself, the D-handle, the cheating potential? Well, what ties everything together is that T-bar rows are lengthen biased. Heck, I even called this out in 2017, crediting the weighted stretch overload, but I didn't realize it was because the top was easier than the bottom. So when the plates are on the ground, the barbell is positioned relatively flat, maybe slightly angled, and as you row up, driving the handles into your hips, the bar is a lot closer to vertical, depending on the height, so between 45 and 70 degrees. This reduces the moment arm from the landmine attachment, similar to what a free weighted preacher curl does. Whereas regular barbell rows maintain a horizontal bar from start to finish, so the lockout will always be more difficult than a T-bar row, which is the least hypertrophic aspect of the row. The squeeze is not as important as the stretch. We can skip it entirely, cheat it through, or get it good enough, like doing lengthen bias rows, which T-bar rows magnify. So let's take this a step further. Those 45-pound plates that everybody complains about, that cuts out the final squeeze, becoming a lengthen partial. And heavier weights can be used to overload the stretch. And the V-bar, same effect. Also, you're stretching inwards and can assume a proper bent forward position in the bottom. Not too upright, but you're still benefiting from the landmine. Then, by cheating a bit, which everyone does, let's be honest, It perfects the circular strength curve by really making the squeeze be negligible and maximizing the weighted stretch. Lastly, all these factors allow for insane progressive overload. You can very likely double your current strength if you're new to T-bar rows. So it's a tried and true mass builder for a very good reason. You can load on those plates over time. So the optimal crew can suck it. By using their own criteria, old school reigns supreme once more. And this is one of the simplest rows you can possibly do. Instead of spending $5,000, spend $20 on a landmine attachment. Even if you butcher the form, your back will still get massive. Can you maintain posterior chain with barbell rows or at least cheat rows? Your form would need to be horrific, where you're barely bending the arms and doing 80% of an RDL with tons of momentum and torso shifting. Basically, how I used to row in 2016. I can't say I recommend that excessive level of cheating anymore, for the risk of injury via peak forces and compromising stimulus to fatigue. Although, it's a powerful trap builder and has good carryover to hip hinges. That said, if you skip legs and only do bent over cheat rows, you can probably maintain your rectors and won't lose as much size in your glutes and hamstrings. But it's a ticking time bomb. So then, here's my suggestion. Why not just do one hard set of deadlifts a week? It'll feed into your bent over rows, you won't need sloppy form either, and provide a high stimulus for many muscles. But since that's all you'll do for legs, the systemic fatigue won't be as noticeable. So it's a safe bet for the minimum effective dose, even though doing deadlifts only is far from ideal. I also suggest conventional and trap bar over RDL, just so that you can get that extra leg drive for the quads. Of course, you probably should do at least one squat variation. Could even be an easy one, and it won't take long to do. One set, come on. But I can't force you to train legs hard if you apparently don't care. So know what you're getting yourself into and how you might regret it later down the road. Like, it's easy to say you don't care about having tree trunks until your strength regresses from, say, advanced to intermediate and your pants are floating but not just around the waist. When that happens, because it's only a matter of time, your desires will be exposed, and maybe that'll whoop you into never being lazy ever again. Like, bro, at least do one squat and one hinge. Just doing cheat rows? You could do better than that. Don't sacrifice what you work so hard to build. Just train low volume with bang for your buck leg exercises, then move on. It's very easy to maintain, but you will have to put in some effort unless your leg genetics are godly and they somehow do fine with just cardio. But maybe you're skipping that too. Do you prefer to add weight after each week, or the weight doesn't matter as long as you're reaching that 1 to 2 reps in reserve? I'm not a novice lifter. I'm not adding weight every week, and it's not a preference thing. Whenever my body has made the necessary adaptations, I go for that extra rep or mini weight jump. Progressive overload is not the driver of hypertrophy. It's a side effect that you already got bigger. It's not get strong to get big, it's get big to get strong. The opposite of forcing progression. So these days, I always train at 0 to 1 RAR, and intensity is maintained throughout the yearly training cycle, which is one less variable for me to worry about. I primarily use basic double progression, not even dynamic, and when plateaus appear, I simply rotate the variation and specialize in correcting muscular weaknesses which can hold back progression on certain movements. The only form of periodization I do is for strength goals, where I hit a weekly max effort lift and then immediately do percentage back down sets that are perfectly calculated, not estimated RPE guesses. And that'll usually be a 3-week wave. So I will either reduce reps in reserve by 0.5 to 1 per week, or add weight by 2.5 to 10 pounds, or increase the percentage by 2.5 to 5%, depending on the exercise, which all achieves the same outcome. If I'm training like this, I'm always in the 4 to 6 and 5 to 10 rep zone, 2 to 3 sets max per exercise, resting 2 to 5 minutes between sets. I never manipulate volume by ramping it up or down, and I never start a mesocycle with many reps away from failure. And my isolation work is usually the complete failure since it's not taxing, and I don't deload often unless I'm also mixing in high frequency calisthenics and or double max effort training. That's the only thing I do to get stronger these days. It's not complicated, and it's naturally a slower route. You might experience the same thing after this novice phase honeymoon is over. So enjoy fast, linear progression while you can. It's never happening again unless you hop on PEDs. It's a one-time deal. Also, watch my video, The Power of One Rep, because adding plus ones when you're strong doesn't scale the same way, as I just pointed out. Neither do percentages. Absolute load is the X factor that must be considered. Alex, why do you wear your backpack in front on your inverted rows? It limits your range of motion and keeps sliding into your face. Just wear it on your back. See, when you wear it on your back, it sags too much. So if you're rowing from even a 12 to 15 inch box, you'll never get a full range of motion since the backpack will hit the floor, becoming a bodyweight pendlay row, which could be good for strength, but for back hypertrophy, you don't want to sacrifice the way to stretch. I also feel this sag compromises torso positioning and stability, making it harder to stay level for less benefit. Plus, this is how you can rip your backpack with heavy weights, given the lack of support that is your body. Lastly, if using gymnastic rings, then there is no limitation in range of motion as you're rowing through the body, but now you have that secure positioning. And regarding hitting yourself in the face, just wear the backpack lower or shove a soft object above the weight plate, like a pillow, and keep the head back or flex forward. Or don't decline your inverted rows so that your body's flat, ensuring the legs and handles are leveled. This flat back equals no slugging in your face. Lastly, the mag group variation you're referring to is specifically designed to be a minor lengthened partial. Removing the last 2 inches of arm bend is not a con in this context. The lats were squeezed enough with the low elbows and the natural top sticking point is lessened. So similar to what I said earlier about T-bar rows, it's also why dumbbell rows with bigger plates is fine. So either you even out the resistance profile of free weighted rows with momentum, or physically restrict the end range with a backpack, boards, bigger weight plates, or torso and head positioning. And that's exactly what I did with this variation. It was on purpose. How is a Larsen press better than normal bench press in terms of chest growth? Doesn't leg drive simply add stability, increasing tension on the chest rather than taking it away? Well, seeing as you only lose 10% on your Larsen press, clearly the stability argument is exaggerated and only works on paper. Be careful when guys talk about this, especially when you consider the fact that leg drive is another huge factor here. So if you were to lay your legs down on a box or have your feet lay passively on the ground like many gym bros do, you would likely see that exact 10% loss even though there's contact throughout the entire kinetic chain. So if you're locked in, yet still lifting less, it's not because your chest isn't producing as much force. In reality, leg drive allows us to maintain a greater arch in the spine, affecting the sternum angle. And when timed correctly, it can make it easier to get through the mid to top sticking point, almost by having a mini heaving effect. Like, have you ever tried grinding on a Larsen press? It's always going to look slower. Even if you're pausing the bottom, there's less momentum. And what you'll notice is that you're forced to protract hard at the top. And since you're not bridging as hard, yes, you can still stay tight, you get a bit more stretch in the bottom. So that extra inch and how the scapulohumeral rhythm is modified maximizes chest stimulation. There's zero cheating, it's all upper body and clearly stable enough given the high absolute loads and progression potential. It's not like comparing ring dips to bar dips. There is a stability continuing. Heck, we even have data on feet up benching recruiting more chest, which corroborates what we see in the real world among gym bros and raw powerlifters who use Larsen pressing to get elite levels of strength. Also, the minor reduction can be viewed as a pro for getting more out of less weight. This matters when you're benching over 315 on a weekly basis. And in 2022, my chest got noticeably bigger by doing 90% Larsen presses. And I got just as strong as feet down. So that's another reason why the top dogs are doing it. For fatigue management. And that's all there is to it. Another great Q&A wrapped up. Let's see some more questions down below. And I'll talk to you next time.